different ways. And it really is about, ultimately, all of this is about knowing who we are. What's beautiful is to witness so many more and more folks starting to see through the veil, through that lens of deception that's gone on. And the deepest truth of that lens is that we've allowed it to happen. Somehow or another, we've fallen asleep, and perhaps that's just part of the script, right? Is that we find our way into awakening into the deeper truth of our true power. And that we, in regards to the system itself, we are actually the energy and the currency of the system. And we have willingly given our energy and power, like our life force energy, we've given it outside of us to something else that isn't a creator. As Johnny was saying, we are part of source creation. So we are the creators by intention, right? That's how powerful we are. And there's this energetic being, consciousness, whatever we want to call it. It doesn't have the same ability to create. So it needs to utilize our currency and energy to create, to mold and sculpt that clay. So when we find ourselves in that awareness, we have to be careful not to judge it. It's been a deep journey of my own to not judge the ones that have created, the ones that have like put the harnesses on our backs and utilized our energy for whatever it is that they're wanting to take because they're not able to. And also to not find ourselves in a space of victimhood, right? So all of those things end up being levels and lenses of confusion that we're finding our way through. So, the substance over the form, that's a big part of what we share in the Sacred Honor Educational Fellowship. And the foundational program within the fellowship itself is called Foundations for Self.
So in the lens, and by the way, I want to say first and foremost that what we're getting ready to share is applicable all over the world. However, we do often speak through the lens of the United States because it helps create context. So in the United States, the original Constitution was designed to limit the legislative powers of government so the people could remain in self-governance. So we could remain in a place where we could live by natural law, right? And the system itself has kind of tried to move us out into what I like to say their own private. In a lot of unintentional ways, we found ourselves into their particular contract. And Josh, I'm getting a little bit of an echo, and it's a little distracting. Came on. Not sure what happened.
Okay, sorry about that, Michael. I was trying to get a clearer signal from you, but try that now. I think it's fixed.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. That's better. Thanks. Oh no, I still hear it. It's in the back. It's bizarre.
It's better from the viewer's perspective, I think. Guys, if it's not good now, let us know. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, please do. So the original organic constitution was designed to protect our natural rights so people could remain in a place of self-governance. So anything outside of our natural rights is some contractual obligation that we found ourselves into, that we've consented into. And over a period of time, we've just forgotten our natural rights, and we think that whatever is in this quote-unquote corporate public system is actually like the law. We've somehow or another think that that's just the only way it is. And it isn't. So when we find our way back to natural law, then we realize, oh, that's so much better. Thank you. Now I feel like I can focus. It's amazing how much an echo can throw you off. So it helps us bring us back to center. So today we're going to really focus most of our attention on natural law, most of our time and attention on natural law. But I wanted to take just a moment to talk about the foundation for self-governance and why it's important to wrap your mind around a pathway back to yourself, right? And it's not the only way. It's a path. It's a series of pathways that we've put together that are practical and usable, and they're not overly complicated. We've spent many years swimming through the over intellectualized complexity of things and boil it down to the things that are really necessary for people to find their way out of what I like to say find their way out of Babylon or find their way back to self-governance, or the bridgeways to self-governance. So in the Sacred Honor Educational Fellowship, the Foundation for Self-Governance has 4 pathways. It's national status passport, trifecta, land patent, and equity. And the national status passport, in simple, I'm just going to go quickly, briefly over some of these. The national status passport, in simple, it helps you recognize that the 14th Amendment citizen is just a contract into the federal corporate United States. And you can look it up yourself. USC 28 USC 3002 subsection 16. It says under the definitions that the United States is a federal corporation. So when you start seeing these obvious evidences in front of you, it helps you reorient yourself. And you notice that the 14th Amendment is actually a contract, and it's different than the language of the Bill of Rights and the constitutional language, which create their own definitions based on their own terms, based on the contract. So the national status passport helps you recognize that and then separate yourself from that. And then you get a new set of credentials. And there's a lot of power in that. So if you want to learn more, you can come in and learn about that. Trifecta is establishing and oh, thank you. That's awesome. Establishing how you set up your affairs and your assets, where you're protecting your life's work and creating real legacy through the divine jurisdiction of a church ministry. And there's a lot of people that might have a challenge with the word church ministry. It's not a religious element at all. And you'll learn a lot about that as you come in. And everything we share, this is a spiritual journey. It's not religious, it's spiritual. So you help create your divine jurisdiction that opens up a private trust. And there's a lot of power in private trust when you learn how to administer them as a trustee. And then you learn how to navigate through private clubs, like Sacred Honor Educational Fellowship is a private club. So you learn a lot about how you can manage your life in that way, and you can intercourse in with the corporate state with more safety as you're building your life deeper and deeper in the private, like thousands, if not millions, if not maybe hundreds of millions of people are actually living their lives at this point. We're really starting to migrate there. It's beautiful. And then there's land patents. Land patents are primarily a term used in the United States, but they do exist all over the world based on treaties. Treaties are very, very powerful contracts that many, many nations and people come together to design. And in the United States, the land patents, when you pull those forward, you live on unencumbered land. You're in a Lloydell title, which means the state has no power and authority to dictate anything on that soil and without any encumbrance, and that includes taxation. Now, there's a lot to learn about that. So that's the land patent, or a Lloydell land pathway. And then there's equity. So today we're going to talk about equity. Equity is what I like to call the ultimate remedy. And as you're building your life in the private, sometimes you have affairs in the public that you need to clean up. And it's a great instrument to go into the public to clean up your affairs and come back into the private. As you're building your strength and knowing who you are, as you're building your strength as a trustee, as you're becoming competent as a trustee. And sometimes you run into matters or affairs in the commercial state, in the public state, where you just need to go and we just say, come clean your hands and come back into the private, which Phil's going to talk in more detail about today in the presentation. So we have a special offer for you guys today. It's a class that's opening up, and it goes down deep down into the education of equity passage, which is equity, the use of equity jurisprudence in a specific fashion. But it's really more about knowing who you are than it is about anything else. We have to really stay focused on that point.
Thank you for that, Michael. That's such a great intro and setting the foundation. Phil, can you just start at the basics about really short, if we can, because we have to cover a lot of ground today, intro on public and private. So there's some people that this is a brand new concept. There's others on the call that are like, I know about it, but what's public and private? What's the difference? How do we know that both exist, and how does that all work?
Oh, thanks for that, Josh. Yeah, well, it's as simple as taking out, if you're in the U.S., for instance, taking out your Federal Reserve note out of your wallet, and that's private and public right on the face of that instrument. It says right on there, all debts public and private. There's also 2 seals on there, Federal Reserve seal, which is private, and the U.S. Treasury seal, which is public, 2 serial numbers, 2 signatures. So what it really comes down to in a nutshell, private versus public, is the contract that is created, the contract that's written, and the parties to the contract. If a state is involved as a third-party intervener, or if it's written as the jurisdiction being underneath the corporate United States, then that's a public contract that you're in. If it's a private contract, yeah, there you go. So you want to zoom in above that Federal Reserve seal, and it'll say right there, it looks like it's cut off, cropped off. It's right above the crop right there. It says all debts public and private, right above the Federal Reserve seal. And that's in the U.S., but as Michael's saying, this is universal. Public and private is essentially, private is the natural world, living sentient moral beings underneath the Creator. That's private. And then public is through the looking glass, and that's where the government, which was created by the living men and women underneath the Creator, decided to make their own little mini-me's, or their own little fictional citizens, which are citizens. That's what citizen means. And a synonym of citizen is inmate. And that's out of the Burns legal thesaurus. So that is not a natural sentient moral being. It is a legal fiction. And we're going to look at that in a minute with the natural law presentation is going to break this down. And it's going to show you where there's fiction in law, or sorry, fiction at law. Let's just put it that way. Near the law is fiction, and inside of the law is lawful and equity. And also in the definition of lawful, if you got a Black's Law Dictionary, read the definition of lawful. It says in there, there's one sentence in there that says, legal is the antithesis of equity. They're telling us it's the opposite. We're 2 opposite systems. So that's private versus public in a nutshell, but it's how we contract, and it's the living versus the fiction is essentially what it is.
Great. I think it would be good to go into that presentation. There may be a couple great points that we can bring out after that presentation in regards to language that's in a contract and who determines that. And I think those are important elements. But
Yes, let's do that. And just a note to everyone watching, please put your questions in real time, like as you have them, and then we will, go through them. Perhaps not right away, but we'll get. I want to get to all questions today. So each one of your questions is important, and thank you for that. Yeah, continue to let us know where you're at with this. How's this landing? Any thoughts? Any additional things that you, if you were in this conversation, what would you say additionally? Put that in the chat because we're co-creating this in real time. Go ahead, Mike.
Love this, and I was just thinking, what might help us disseminate a question or determine what's, because there's a lot of chat coming through, which is awesome. Maybe capitalize your question. That might help us identify them a lot easier. Thank you.
Either capitalize, or even if you could just put the letter Q, and then we'll make sure everything that starts with a Q, we'll get to it. All right. Thanks, guys. Take it away.
All right. Awesome. Thank you. Sharing my screen now. Everybody see that?
Yeah.
All right. Wonderful. Perfect. All right. So it's a great honor to be here today sharing, and let's get started off here. All right. So all information presented is provided for informational and entertainment purposes only and does not constitute legal, tax, or financial advice. But it is lawful, however. All right. Great. So as I said, I'm honored to be here, and today we're going to be exploring equity jurisprudence. Now, jurisprudence actually breaks down to the science or study of equity, and it's distinct from the equity jurisdiction, which we'll get to in a moment. But I want to talk about the role of natural law and modern legal and commercial systems, which we're all in today. There's no gold and silver substance being used. It's all the public credit, and it's all commerce, and I'll talk more about that in just a minute. But first, I'd like to start. I know some of you have probably gone and gotten the Equity Unveiled complimentary ebook already. Josh has been kicking out the link for that. If you have not, definitely go and scoop it up. It's a transformative introduction, and it's introducing you to the journey of the principles of equity jurisprudence, and which is the study of natural law, or natural justice rather. And the book contains over 30 pages, almost 40 pages actually, and it's just a really great introduction to introduce how equity has been shrouded within the modern system. And it also highlights transformative principles and the main tools that equity provides for us for remedy. So at the end of the presentation, Josh will provide a link for you to go scoop your ebook, and also there's a special video presentation with Michael and I that we did that dives deeper into this. We talked about private and public. Well, this is your invitation into the private so that we can even share more with you. So that's what we're doing here today, is introducing you to come and check out more. But for now, that's the common goal we share here. I mean, we're all part of this movement where there's a paradigm shift underway, and all things natural are making a comeback. Natural medicine and natural foods are becoming much more important to focus on again. And also, at the foundation of any society is law. So natural law is definitely making a comeback as this great awakening is underway. As the video we watched at the beginning of this presentation, there's a resonance there, and all of us are being called vibrationally to join together and bring back the old paradigm, which is actually the new paradigm I'm talking about, not the one we've been in, but the one that we inherently know as natural living beings. The natural paradigm is what's coming back. So we're here to talk about reestablishing alignment for natural law and remedial justice, which is actually a synonym, we'll see in a minute, of equity, because this is the key to curing the disease in the justice system. And this goes way beyond treating symptoms, just like naturopathic cures do. Now, the symptoms take many forms in this system, but usually boil down to government overreach, predatory commercial practices, and debt that all seems unfair and unjust when you're involved in it, or even if you're seeing it occurring around you. So what is the root cause? Well, next slide, I want to begin by talking about law in the context of fictional law versus natural law, and what they are, and what is the distinction between them. So first, let's look up the entry for the word fiction in Burton's Legal Thesaurus, 4th edition, to learn more. So fiction, or fictional law rather, legal, in quotes, is created by man by enactment and or convention. I was talking a minute ago about public, how the government created its own fictional system paralleling the natural system. So fiction is inside the public, inside the looking glass, so to speak. And we can see the synonyms here for fiction. Fiction is a concoction, a fable, fabrication, invention, lie, and product of imagination. And we have some foreign phrases down here, which are maxims, which I'll explain more about what these are in a moment. But we see the maxims here. A fiction is wrongful if it works loss or harm to anyone. Fictions arise from the law, and not the law from fictions. Fiction yields to truth. Where truth is, fiction of law does not exist. Hallelujah to that. So here is the root cause. Fiction, the ailment that creates the symptoms. Now, what does fiction look like in this current system, you might ask? Well, we can look no further than Admiralty Maritime Law and the role of at law in the legal fiction, and these are important to take notice of. See, fictional law translates to legal fiction and is under Admiral Maritime jurisdiction. And this is a federal jurisdiction that administers trade and commercial contracts. Included in this is statutes, codes, enactments, mandates, ordinances, etc. And these are all creations of legal fiction. Now, I'm not saying that the fiction has no impact. It can seem all too real if one is engaged in the legal system. However, remember, legal is inside the contract. Legal formalities or form refer to the contract language that defines its terms. And this establishes the law of the contract to be enforced under Admiralty Maritime jurisdiction. Now, Michael hinted at the contractual 14th Amendment and the public compact that was under that, but I want you to think about everything you do in the system. There's always a box to check. There's always a signature required. There's always some type of contract or agreement almost every step of the way, because this is how the legal fiction gains jurisdiction over the matter. It doesn't exist outside of that. Remember that. There needs to be a contract to create the law of the contract. So outlaw means near the law and not inside of the law. Attorneys are employed at or near the law, and they're not in law. So when you see the term at used in a legal context, know that this is a term of fiction. Now, in contrast, the divine foundation of natural law is created through natural order. Natural law and order apply to substance. As Michael opened the call, substance over form. Legal is form. Formalities lacks any moral compass whatsoever. However, substance, on the other hand, is all about morality, is all about fairness, is all about what's natural. It's what's real, what is tangible, and what holds value beyond simple perception. Now, to gain more understanding on the meaning of natural, let's look again in Burton's Legal Thesaurus, 4th edition. So natural law comes from a higher authority than government or man. Nature is authentic, fundamental, genuine, innate, organic, realistic, true to life, and unartificial. Natural law is authentic and governs sentient natural beings. The legal fiction, as we just talked about, can only look to imitate the genuine natural law or natural order. So in law, lawful is in alignment with natural law, and equity and lawful are very closely related as far as terms. And I mentioned earlier about how legal is the antithesis of equity. So legal, fictional, equity, natural. We're starting to see the opposites here. So in this contrast, legal is fictional and bound inside the language of the contract. So natural law is the only law, actually, that man can agree on across national boundaries. So it is at the genesis of the law of nations. So these nations cannot agree on their fictional enactments and all of their laws that they make underneath their quote-unquote sovereign corporate commercial governments that are running in the system today. And so they can't even agree on those ground rules between one or the other. So natural law is the default. And that's what the balancing forces in the worldwide community. So common law and civil law are based in equity. This makes up the foundation of law in approximately 140 nations currently. As equity is the civil remedy, it plays an important role. So if you're in a common law nation or civil law nation, I want you to look up equity at the foundation of your justice system. And it's alive and well and available for you to take advantage of as far as being a natural sentient being. So let's look further into natural law, the natural law equity, known as the spirit of the law, and it creates natural justice. So equity is synonymous with fair-mindedness, fair treatment, fairness, honesty, ideal justice, impartial justice, justice as distinguished from enactments and statutes, justice ascertained by natural reason, natural right, recourse to the principles of natural justice, remedial justice, righteousness, spirit of the law, and is the unwritten law. See, equity is not written down. It is based on principles that must be, are the guiding principles that good laws ought to be based on. And when the law fails to provide an adequate remedy, as we see here, remedial justice, equity is always available to step in and bring a remedy when there is an inequity present. So equity is a system of natural justice that embodies the principles and authority of natural law. Because we know, as we study nature, nature always provides holistic remedies. And the equity jurisdiction provides natural remedies in law. And we can see here, equity has its own jurisdiction. In the United States Constitution and most constitutions in all the common law nations, and you can find this in civil as well, there's multiple different jurisdictions. And equity has its own jurisdiction, and what that jurisdiction means is the way that that system of justice is administered. Now, to better understand the principles of the unwritten law, I mentioned earlier, we want to look to the maxims of law and equity. See, equity is so distinct that the maxims are called maxims of law and equity. It has its own heading and has to be distinct even in the maxims. So maxims are principles of law and equity that are agreed on and accepted by all. The principles found in maxims provide the wisdom to create law, interpret law, and decide law. And a maxim is so called because in dignity it is chiefest, and its authority the most certain, because it is universally approved by all. Now, if you've studied law at all, you know that when absolute words are used, such as we're seeing here, that's not up for debate, and these maxims have been around much longer than our forefathers, and go way back to actually the wisdom commands of spiritual texts and the way and the principles of living as a natural being and creating a harmonious world. And we can find those wisdom commands in the scriptures, or whatever religious text is at the foundation of the system that you're in.
Phil, just a quick question here from Apocalypse Now. If you could go back to the previous picture, is there any color which encompasses the countries in that?
Oh yeah. Oh yes. So when I say 140 nations worldwide, that's a fluctuate depending on your source, because there's different degrees of common law, adoption and civil law adoption. Essentially, they both came from the Latin system, civis juris, and then common law went through England. So all the English-based countries around the world, Canada, Australia, United States, just to name a few, there's about 45 common law nations, and then the rest of them, 95 or 100 civil law nations, which were Napoleonic law that kind of came through Italy and France. So that's where, but equity, I just want to be clear, equity is only a name that's used in the West for natural law. Natural law exists worldwide, and any nation that wants to be part of international trade and a member of the IMF or is intercoursing with different nations around the world must agree to the same ground rules so that there is a uniform way to conduct business, the law of nations, which equity and natural law. And it may not be called equity in every system due to the fact that that's what the West calls it in these two systems. However, it must be adhered to and observed to intercourse with other nations that are operating on those principles.
Thank you. Would you prefer to discuss in real time if people post questions about a specific slide, or do you want to get through this and we ask those questions after?
Let's hold the questions till after. That way it could turn into an hour-long slideshow otherwise.
Perfect.
So if we can peg those questions, I can come back and give a detailed answer to all of them, but otherwise it'll just chop up the flow, and it'll probably take a much longer time to get through it.
And some of your questions might be answered during the slide as well. So there'll be some 100%. Deeper comprehension hopefully after. Yeah.
100%. Yes. Yes. All right. Great. So yeah, I'll get more into that, but it's definitely there's students applying this in many different nations with successful. And I'll tell you more about that. I think with that's a question that can be delved into deeper later on in the presentation. So getting back on track, this is our first maxim of equity, and take this in from what we've been studying in the slideshow so far. In a fiction of law, equity is always present. Now, we talked about how these are universally approved by all, maxims. So this is something that has to be adhered to. Acknowledge it, and this acknowledges the delineation not only between natural law and fictional legal at law, but it also is a promise that the natural law equity will always be present to remedy the fiction, always present. Another absolute word, that means a lot in law. The law uses ambiguous terms a lot of the time, but when it's certain, it is certain. So how does a natural law equity operate within the system? Well, I talked earlier about the scriptures. Have you ever wondered why there's a Bible in the courtroom and one must swear on the Bible to testify? Well, in the scriptures, which are the wisdom commands of nature and the principles of law, we read, let them sing before the Lord, for he comes to judge the earth. He will judge the world in righteousness and the peoples with equity. We saw righteousness was a synonym of equity, so that this is a double equity statement here, using a synonym and the prime word. Now, the scriptures are the foundation of natural law, as I mentioned, and these natural principles are the basis for the maxims of law and equity that would follow in the system of law, and which is the foundation of society. Now, also references to the authority and distinctions of natural law appear throughout history. Here, St. Ambrose, a highly influential 4th century bishop, spoke notably on natural law, including this quote, law is twofold, natural and written. The natural law is in the heart, and the written law on the tables. So it just means written down and recorded. Now, all men are under the natural law. There's a distinction. All men, which includes women, are under the natural law. So who's under the written law? Well, we talked a little bit about that, about the government fictions, and that's a whole other topic. But to simplify this, all sentient moral beings are under natural law, unless they contract into the fictional written law, as we were talking about. There's something called alienable rights and unalienable rights. Alienable rights are contractual privileges and benefits. Unalienable rights are natural, and this is what it's talking about here, is unalienable rights. They cannot be liened. Here's another maxim. By natural law, it is not just that anyone should be enriched by the detriment or injury of another. Now take this in for a second. Natural law does not allow for anyone to be benefiting or enriching themselves by injuring another. I say this is very potent, because this maxim's pertaining to the legal and commercial system that currently exists, and most notably, the money, okay? Now in the United States, or the lack thereof money, and that's a whole nother rabbit hole as well. We dive into that more in the ebook Equity Unveiled and the special video. We talk more about this. But to touch on it right now, and no matter what nation you're in, worldwide, the money change away from gold and silver to public credit happened around a similar timeline to 1933, which is where it happened in the United States. So I want you to just look up in your country when gold and silver standard went away and when public credit came in, because this was a global situation. But we're in the United States here, so that's what we show, and it kind of led the way as far as the central bankers and Federal Reserve, and we can see the results of where United States influence stands around the world. It was all a plan. But for instance, when gold backing was removed from the money, then the current legal system switched to be commercially based, and again, public debt began to really take effect. So definitely read more about this in the ebook and watch the video. So I just want to point to the United States Constitution, and I have a student in Australia that I was having a conversation with, and theirs is very similar to this, almost very similar to this. So that's what I'm saying. There's a lot of similarities between nations here. So in the case of the U.S., the constitutional money, gold and silver, were removed without a constitutional amendment. And this action is in violation of many natural principles, and it is in violation of that maxim we just read. It's creating an injury so someone else can benefit or profit from it. So notice it's also written here. Laws cannot be made to impair the obligation of contracts. So this is the crux. Now, to simplify, the money changed to a public debt-based economy, but however, the law of the contract obligation remains in full effect. Now I've explained that legal exists in the contract, and equity as natural law creates the remedy, and it ultimately presides or supervises the legal fiction and also the form of contracts. So this is very important to remember. Now, I just want to say that taking the gold and silver way out of the system, which is constitutional, and it is in many nations. Read your constitution for where it talks about this. That is treason if you don't amend the Constitution. So that creates a definite injury of unalienable rights, and that's where equity steps in, because it will not allow an injury to happen. So here's another maxim. The law is nothing without equity, but equity is everything even without the law. So this shows where in the hierarchy of the justice system that equity sits. And this is a very important maxim. It also shows a distinction again between law and equity. They're two very distinct things. So when equity is applied correctly, it will supersede all other law forms, which includes, you guessed it, legal contracts. Equity as natural justice has the highest authority, and we're told over and over again. This is just one example. Now you might be asking at this point, what will equity do for you? How in this system, in this climate, with this public debt-based economy, what is the remedy? And so this brings us to the three main tools. And this is how we can become liberated from the fictional legal system. Now, the first tool is the principle of discharge. There's no longer any way to pay for anything. There's no gold or silver. So there's only discharge with legal tender. Again, another rabbit hole to go down, but that's where we're at. So this is the natural mechanism written into the public policy that superseded the Constitution, or actually didn't supersede the Constitution, overlaid the Constitution. And this is our remedy that was written into the public policy. Now, this is the main tool in equity because you can settle the public debts. But even if you're not in debt, this helps you settle contract offers that are presented to you without dishonoring them, without consenting. So it's a way to stay in honor without consenting and hold your own whenever you're offered a contract. Now, the second tool, dissolution of public contracts. So if you have entered a public contract, equity provides a remedy to release you from the binding obligations of that legal contract. So that's the second tool. The third tool, the power of inquiry. Now, this is very important because in equity, it's peaceful. We do not argue the facts, jurisdiction, law, or venue. We don't make claims. It's not an adversarial form or system of justice to apply. It wants to make everyone whole and wants to treat everyone with respect and dignity. So instead, we ask questions. What's truly lawful? Because there's a maxim that says, inquire into doubtful matters to discover what is truly lawful. So we take that seriously here. So this is how we expose the fictional aspects of charges and any claim against you. We inquire into the equitable nature of the matter without arguing, disputing, or making claims. And the Equity Unveiled ebook, again, talks a little bit more about these three tools, gives you a little more information there. So the balancing force of law is the key to liberation from the inequitable legal and commercial debt burdens. And this is a process of relearning how to operate within the system through understanding natural law. And this requires proper study, internalization, and application. Because I mentioned, we talked about private and public before, and equity is a private remedy, which means that we can only talk so much about it in the public, or else private can't be public, because then it wouldn't be private. So anyway, they don't mix public and private, or oil and water. So we can't talk directly to you about private matters. We can introduce it, and we can also invite you in to learn more. So that's what we're here to do, is we're here to invite you into our private community, and we can share much more about the specifics in that forum. So the great thing is, everyone, that the time is now, and the tools are available to exit this public legal construct and the associated commercial debts, and truly embrace the power of natural law. And we can disencumber from the fictional operational methods to cleanse and renew internal systems. We've all heard about cleansing in natural medicine and food. And I'm on a parasite cleanse right now. Cleansing's great, and we can do this with this fictional law as well, because there's an alternate natural way to live, and we can see law through the lens of equity. We can put down those legal burdens and those legal contracts and debt obligations, because equity provides a transformative path to self-governance, as Michael was talking about earlier. To truly be self-governing, it involves responsibility, and there's liability to it, but also there's power, the power to be self-determined and know how to apply natural law. And this is a process, so having the proper guidance and community is important, and that's why we're here today to talk to you. As I mentioned a minute ago, this is similar to detoxifying from artificial foods and substances. This artificial fictional law is ingrained in our thought processes. So there's a process for unlearning the fictional old ways of operation and cleansing our internal systems of toxins. So you have the choice to detoxify from the fictional legal system of contracts and commercial debt when you decide to. As there are distinctions between artificial legal rules and natural principles, similar to the choice between conventional and organic produce. We've all heard those terms before. And they also call fictional law conventional. That was one of the synonyms. And then organic was synonymous with equity. So legal at law is engineered to enforce the language of the contract. And on the other side, natural law reflects intrinsic, lawful, equitable moral principles. At law is formed by alienable rights, as I mentioned before, and obscures the essence of natural justice. And again, alienable rights are in fact contractual granted privileges and are not technically rights, but rather terms of the contract, benefits of the contract and privileges. Now on the other side, natural law is rooted in unalienable rights and holds ideal justice. Unalienable rights, again, are natural rights inherent to nature and granted by the Creator, not any man or government. Now, fictional law treats the symptoms, not the cause. Natural law remedies the true cause of the ailment. The ailments of fictional public debt, legal contracts, and the presumed authority the system operates on can be cured with natural justice and not merely treated with fictional law. Now, the time is now to choose the path forward. Will it be fictional law or natural law? The law of the contract or the principles of natural justice? The legal formalities, the language of the contract void of any moral compass, or the lawful principles of natural equity that strives for morality and fairness? At law, where legal fiction is near the law, or in law, where natural rights are lawful and upheld? Admiralty Maritime, the federal trade and commerce jurisdiction of fiction, or equity jurisprudence, the natural law jurisdiction? Form and perceived fictional value, or substance and natural intrinsic value? And here's another promise in this maxim of equity. Equity will not suffer a wrong without a remedy. So natural law is always accessible to provide remedies for the fictional inequities and disease present in the public system. So we can take this to heart, and we've seen maxims throughout this presentation that uphold the ability to not be injured or wronged by an inequitable system, fictional system that is. So guess what? You have the power to disencumber yourself from the trappings of the legal and commercial system, step in the self-determination, step in the self-governance, where public legal charges and commercial debt burdens are designed to weigh down and toxify you. It's time now to see through the fiction and disencumber yourself to realize your true natural purpose. Free your time and energy to give the natural gifts you are here on this earth to give. Live in liberty in alignment with natural law. Embrace the ideal justice that equity provides. Here is the pathway to learn and embody natural justice. The next step forward is contained in this special invitation we're here to offer to you today, to lean into the private and receive the insights to empower your path forward in natural justice. So as stated, it is a private remedy and must be shared in the private, and that's why we're here to invite you to join us and move into the private into the natural law. And the first step is the Claim the Equity Unveiled ebook and watch the special video presentation, which are both valuable resources and a gift to you when you accept this special invitation. So first step, if you haven't done it already, jump right in. And the Great Awakening, as I mentioned, the Great Awakening of all things natural is upon us. It's here, folks. And the time is now. And it's that the key is equity jurisprudence as it is natural justice, as we've seen. So the first step is to learn more and embrace this opportunity, embrace this invitation, and hop into the private community to be strengthened. And iron sharpens iron, and that's what we're there to do as a community. So it has been a great honor, everybody. Thank you for listening to my presentation, talking about natural law and equity as natural justice. And it's been a great time. Thank you for your time. And together, we're building a bridgeway to self-governance. So that's my presentation, and I'd love to open it up for the questions and discussion.
Cool. Thank you. So I wanted to, if some of you are unfamiliar with this completely, it can definitely be a little like disorienting. How do I put myself, like, what's a practical way for me to see this? So I'm going to explain, I'm going to summarize it in a different way. In the world of natural, in the world of fiction, and everything we say, when we say fiction, we're talking about the corporate state. That is a built within a contract. That's what we're trying to share with you. And when you find yourself into a contract, there's that statement that Phil was saying that the law is inside the contract. He says the legal is inside the contract. I say the law is inside the contract, because any contract that you sign, even if the legal state's not in it, is the law. That's really how it's designed. And you can create your own definitions in there, right? So in the corporate state, you have all the United States codes and all those things. Those are built into their contractual terms. And when you find yourself in a contract with them, unwittingly or not, you're bound by those contracts. So here's how equity comes in. If you find yourself into a contract, into that corporate state, and you think you're bound by all those statutory rules, if there's any one of those statutory rules that injures your natural right, that's where equity steps in and goes, whoa, wait a second. We need to equalize this unjust thing here. There's something that's actually injuring your right. That's an unalienable or unalienable right that can't be injured. It's protected by divine jurisdiction. That's the deeper essence of this. And when you know who you are and understand how this functions in simplicity, you step in as that sovereign power and say, whoa, I'm here to equalize this. And equity jurisprudence is that pathway back to natural justice. So what we teach you, so there's a class that we're going to share with you. In the first part of the class, it teaches you the laws and the principles so you can embody that truth. And then in the second half of the class, we teach you how to apply aspects of equity jurisprudence in specific ways, like understanding how to move away from those contracts that are injuring you and move away from those contracts that might be, and some of those injuries might be how they're binding into taxable events that are actually not taxable based on natural law. So you grok that, and then you learn how to move away from that lawfully and legally, where all parties are whole and it's peaceable. There's no arguing, there's no claiming, there's no status you need to have. There's no special documentation, there's no EIN, there's no special dance, there's no hack. It's just truth. And that's where the biggest power of this comes in. And I know it's a little challenging to wrap the mind around. And I say, have grace on yourself in this process as you learn how to look through life. You look through the lens of life through the other side. And it takes a little bit of time. And we help you walk through that. And everything we do in the Sacred Honor Educational Fellowship and the equity pathway, the equity passage class is a great galvanizing, grounding tool to help you in that process. What are you thinking, Phil?
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, first, this is a whole different way. Like I said in there, it's about detoxifying from what we knew and taking in a whole different perspective. It's being down in the thick of it, being, as Alison wanted to use an analogy, through the looking glass. Okay, we're waking up in the looking glass where the Jabberwocky's walking around. which is the let's just say the international bankers, okay, or they created this fiction, this parallel. It's an overlay. We can go back to nature anytime we want. We can our natural unalienable rights are protected. That's what constitutions actually do. They protect our unalienable divine rights. And I saw a question in the chat about, is that in the Constitution in my country? Yeah, there was gold and silver and they took it away. I was just telling you, I was looking at the Australian Constitution, and the language is almost exactly the same as the United States Constitution. It exists everywhere, but you got to think of it this way too. There's two pyramids, two power structures. There's the creator on top in the natural system with living men and women, sentient moral beings. And then sentient moral beings created the government to administer only certain affairs, and that's at the bottom of the pyramid. Now we go through the looking glass, and it's just like eyeballs. It turns it over on the other side. Government on top. And then they created U.S. citizens, which they bound the living men and women contractually to be liable, the surety. It's a business entity. That's all it is. So you're the responsible party, just like an LLC. Then at the bottom of the pyramid is the creator. That's why there's so much less emphasis, and the state puts itself up above that. And in that system, it's alienable rights. They can lien that citizen, and that's where the charges come from.
It's a title.
Yes. And so they can't actually even intercourse, like the fiction cannot even intercourse, and the Supreme Court has upheld this. They can't intercourse with the natural world. That's why they needed to make a fictional business entity a citizen, which is not us. It's a piece of paper in a filing cabinet somewhere in the government office. And that is a business entity that the government is a party to, and that's why they can lien it, and that's why they can charge it. And then they come after you because you're the responsible party of that business. Anyone that has a business, there has to be a responsible party. And the responsible party carries a liability, but also carries a power. And we're here to talk about the power.
So what I'd like to do, there's a lot of questions in here, and I'd like to start getting to some. And before we do, can we talk about the class really quick? Do we want to do a quick, here's the link, and I want to explain the pathway to get there.
Yeah, that's good. Let's do that momentarily, and then we'll dive into these questions.
Yes, I definitely want to go through these questions, and I love that you guys have a lot of questions, a lot of good stuff. So when Phil was talking earlier about we don't, it's a private remedy, and we don't bring the private remedy into the public. So why? The one who creates controls. It's a maxim of law. And I didn't create the federal corporate United States. I'm pretty sure none of you did either. We might be the currency of that, but we didn't create it. They're just leeching off of us. So within that understanding, I'm not going to step into, like if Phil created his own corporation, I'm not going to step into Phil's corporation as a non-member and say, yo, I want you to start changing all these things. And I want to start bringing a bunch of stuff in here that's going to expose elements of what you're doing behind the scenes that might wake up some of the people in your corporation. Well, what's Phil going to do? Well, he's going to take his boot and he's going to step on me. So we're not interested in creating controversy. That's our point. So when we say public, we're living sentient men and women, and we have these discussions not in the public. This is considered a public forum. Okay, so we want to invite you into the private so we can start having a more explicit conversation. So I'm telling you this because in the sharing of this ebook, this offering that we're giving you, it's an education that we're just granting to you, or it's complimentary. You need to go on to that ebook page, and and some of you might have already received it. That's fine. You can go onto the ebook page and put in the same information again, and then that pop-up window is going to come up. Okay, so the ebook will show up in your email box, and immediately, boom, a window is going to pop up, and it's going to be that educational video that Phil and I were talking about. You can watch it or not. I think you should watch it. It's amazing. It's so informative. But if you've already watched it, super duper. Scroll down to the bottom, and then you'll see all the enrollment options. And today there's a special offer that Josh is bringing forward. You can enroll today or up until March 5th, which is this coming Wednesday, and you get $500 off the course. Off the class, off the enrollment of this particular class. So, and Josh, you ought to put that link in there now. Okay, so there it is. So on the screen, there's the link for you to, like I said, get the ebook, put that information in, Immediately a window will pop up. The ebook will come in your email box, and then you can watch the video or not. If you haven't already, scroll down to the bottom, look at the options, and then put in the JDS 500W3, and then you can enroll into the class and get $500 off the class. So anyway, I just wanted to share that so some of you weren't confused at why there are steps. It's because we're inviting you into the private, and that's a great lesson for you guys to learn.
When is that code, that $500 discount code good until, Michael?
March 5th.
March 5th, okay.
So let's dive into some questions, because there's some super juicy ones. And I guess you could probably leave that up while we're going through questions, maybe, or maybe not.
Yep, okay, let's do it. I just want to ask a question first. So, I mean, part of the thing, I think the process for even myself, honestly, and other people, I've been aware of the private since 2008, since I did a course in Canada called the Foundation of Rights and Freedoms. But still part of the process is people are actually using equity jurisprudence to clear permanently significant debts in their life. This is actually happening in this course. And some of those debts are perhaps 4, 5, 6, perhaps even more figures, right? Can you talk about that? And so that we understand that this is a proven pathway that, as I understand, it's 100% effective for somebody that goes into the course, that studies, embodies it, and then does the actions that you do as a group with the support of the organization. Help us make that real in our minds so that we can see, I understand this is more than just learning conceptually.
Yes,
Great.
yes, I can speak to that for a moment. As we looked at those maxims in the presentation, equity always provides a remedy. And so, as I said, when constitutional money, and again, you can look in your nation, there was constitutional money, gold and silver at one point, and then in the early 1900s, around 1930, give or take, the public policy or fictional law enactment, as we read, overlaid the constitutional legal lawful tender rather with legal tender. There's big difference, and we saw the definition of legal. It's fictional, it's fiat. We call it fiat. It's fake. Okay, that's a synonym of fiat. Now, what happened in that is the substance shifted from gold and silver, which is natural and intrinsic, to the living, breathing human beings, the people of the nation, all the people of the nation. Sweat equity. As Michael alluded to earlier, we're the only one that can animate the system. So they start leeching off of our creative energy and our industriousness. And they quantified that. It's like the matrix. It's a battery. They're sucking the energy out. Now that's inequitable because not only is it contrary to the natural law, but it's also contrary to the unalienable protections of our constitutions. It's treason. But in order to not be guilty of inflicting harm or injury under this practice, they had to write in, they actually wrote it in, the remedy and equity. They wrote it in there. It's not a theory, okay? It's written in there. They had to write it in there parallel, or else they would be guilty of all the things I just talked about. And nobody wants to be in violation of natural justice. And you got to think of it this way too. The elites want natural justice for themselves. They don't want to be underneath the thumb of all the fictional rules. And so they have to leave that pathway open for themselves too, because they're subject to law. Okay, so all of us know about the sitting president having felony convictions by a jury verdict of guilty. He received an unconditional discharge, and now poof, it went away even with a guilty jury verdict. That's real life proof of equity working in the system. Okay, he applied equity, right? All of us can too. It's available to us. People call it a loophole. Okay, these elites don't pay taxes, don't go to jail, don't do this. They're not using a loophole. They actually know the law. They know equity. And they're applying it, and that's why they seem to live by a different set of rules, okay? Because this is available to us, and that's the point. So it's not only goes for six-figure debt. It doesn't matter how much the dollar amount is. It doesn't matter. It's all credit. It's all bookkeeping. There's no gold and silver. You don't have to come up with a mountain of gold and silver and we explain how this works in detail in the course. You get to learn how the system actually works in the financial commercial world. That's another bonus of this, is you get to see with the equity eyes, we call it, and you get to learn how it actually works. And you can strategize and make your decisions based on this information. and have a completely different outcome. And the great thing about equity too, there's a maxim that says equity does what ought to be done. So it can time travel if there's no statute of limitations with equity. You can go down, if you realize you should have gone back and done something else, you can go back and fix it, and it's almost never too late to bring equity and receive your remedy. You can unmake things and turn around, and I call it going into the woods of dishonor. If you're in the woods of dishonor, like let's say with the taxing agency, and you owe them 6 figures and they're leaning and threatening you with criminal investigation, you can decide to turn around and you can decide to start walking out of the woods. Now, it's a process. It's not fast, easy, or free. I want to be clear about that. The more you know, the scriptures tell us we perish for our lack of knowledge, and the law mirrors that. So now I'm putting you all on notice, and just as I was put on notice, that this is available to you. So knowing that it's available to you and not taking advantage of it, then whatever happens in your experience will be the sum of your results and the sum of your decisions. And that's the way that goes. And Michael, I see your finger up.
Yeah. Thank you, Phil. I mean, I just want to dive into the class information, because some people, I'd love your question, RC Thunder. I'd love to bring it forward. The particular class that has been put together is the most comprehensive equity jurisprudence post 1933 equity, which, by the way, works throughout the history. However, this is a focus of post 1933. Pre 1933 is considered exclusive equity. Now, there are a lot of other groups that are teaching exclusive equity. I know of several of them. I don't have any beefs with them. I don't think they're good or bad or right or wrong. I honestly, I haven't gone through a lot of their classes, and I don't know their real history. But this is not exclusive equity. Exclusive equity has a lot to do with trusts and how you're navigating through the Siskiyou and elements. And maybe that's what Anna von Reitz says stay away from. That might fall into secured party creditor processes. I don't know, because there's a lot of different things that people are doing. I can say what we're doing with great certainty. Bill, you've been practicing equity and studying equity for 18 years. What makes a good teacher from one who may not be as effective is how long you've been in practice, your track record, and you've had enough time to cycle through practices of equity and discharge. So history is a big part of it. And the class that we have, the way it's put together, it's very, very comprehensive. And do you want to take a minute to talk about that, Phil?
Yes, absolutely. So there's something called concurrent equity, and it's malleable to the situation, just like the money change is a good example of that. Now, that's Michael is alluding to exclusive equity in post 1933. So when inequitable situations arise in the system, equity is a malleable, flexible, elastic force, and it will provide a remedy no matter what the inequity is. So that's distinct from that. Now, it really comes down to the energy field. I spoke about equity earlier. Now, if you have a head full of equity and a heart full of rage and rebellion, it's not going to work for you. That's not even in the spirit or the principles of equity. So it's about realigning our energy field, which is part of the divine spiritual mission, as we were talking about at the beginning of this. So it's about principle based. It's not something that it's not about using the shield to bludgeon your opponent. It's about settling, and it's about going to peace with things. And there's a lot of, and there's reasons for it. This system breeds a lot of frustration and a lot of anger. I used to be very angry with it before I found equity, and equity was a way to go to peace. Now, some people, if your intention is to go after the system, like Michael is talking about, if you want to be, go into their house, their corporate house, and try to tell them how to run their show, that's not what this is about. This is about knowing who you are and standing in your private space and your private area, and holding and making sure that you're protected and you can settle those public challenges when they come against you. Now, as far as people offering equity, I would just be very careful and very discerning, and use prudence is a good tool to use. You have to measure that energy field and what the words they're using and what they're saying. I also want to caution people when snake oil salesmen, when they promise the moon, if they're promising absolute results and using and saying, you know, I just saw one the other day that was saying, settle any criminal matter. You know, if you injured somebody or hurt somebody, good luck with that, because, you know, equity wants to make all parties whole. So if you see anybody that's making huge promises and trying to light it up, yeah, this works, this works, but it comes from you. You're the source. So that you got to look in the mirror and you have to proceed in that way. So it's not just outward results, it's inward results, and I want to be clear about that. So if someone's not telling you that, then that's a big red flag in my opinion. But I was talking about the course for a minute. There's lots of different educational offerings out there in all different fields. So there's always, you know, but when there's the ability to unpack things and distill them down to you know, finite levels and bring all the context in, because if somebody is not telling you, for instance, teaching you the fundamental principles and diving super deep into those aspects and to create an understanding inside of yourself, then that's what the equity passage and the intent was behind it. There's over 60 hours of video content that dives. It's the deepest dive into the principles and the information to date. That's one of my big things was to create a platform that would serve audio visual learning. So if you're a visual learner, it's over 60 hours of footage and you never see my face, okay? Because it's all about the visual representations and the examples, and we want to feed your equity eyes so that you can cognize what's being spoken of. And then auditory wise, it's very chock full of that. So it's for audio visual learning. It's very intuitively laid out and it's linear. So each session unpacks specific topics and all the context is delivered in line with that content and with that session. So there's no skipping around, there's no confusion. It's very, very decisive as far as what's being presented. And the goal is that the ones that travel through the passage will have this internalized and be thinking in these terms and have, as Josh was saying, you'll be able to discharge whatever's in front of you. Now there's more complex matters. I mean, a caution against rushing into things. We have the 3 Ps. I'll just say for a second: posture, process, and pace. And so we talk a lot about that. It's about being honest with yourself about where you're at and what you're ready for, because equity will take care of whatever needs to be taken care of. Now, are you ready for it? Do you have your process developed? Do you have the pace? Do you have the bandwidth in your space in your life and the ability to walk that out? And then also the posture. Have you embodied the energy field? Because you could it's not just about paperwork. It's about embodying that natural essence and that natural justice, and not arguing with something that's supposed to be delivered in a fair and then the spirit of the law. We saw that. It's the spirit of the law, where it's about the higher road. It's about taking the high road and not devolving into all the lower vibrational aspects that exist inside the looking glass in the fictional system.
Can I just jump in there and say, I know, Michael, you had another thought there as well. I just want to quickly say, you guys have allowed me to learn about this pathway personally. I've had the ability to audit and preview some of the previous wave of the course, and I just got to say, like, it's probably, I mean, the Empower movement and your Telegram group of active users are probably the 2 most positive, grounded, like, energy fields or communities that I've come across. Like the vibe in your community is outstanding, and it's because it's grounded in reality and love, both. And I just want to honor you guys for that and recognize that I've been burned by someone in the past. You mentioned other teachers and stuff like that being promised. It was they were in the process of apparently setting up 2 trusts for me, and they never honored their word. And there are so many, teachers and people out there that in this space where you really have to be mindful. And for you guys, like Michael, you and I met at Liberty's Horizon in person 3 years ago, and that was one of the best weekends, in the past 3 years for me. That was awesome. I just want to go back to you on this. Okay, quick reflection. It seems to me that this is a core at the heart and soul of the financial aspect of the Great Awakening, of the Great Reset. And it seems to me that the external mirrors the internal. It seems to me that the forces and powers in this world and the way they operate are like doing similar things to what is available for us as people in terms of like accountability and the Doge, and all of this, Great Reset type ideas, but it's at like an octave below what is available to us as men and women. So if I can explain that, the octave higher is one with love, is one in the private, is one where we are men and women and we're not subject to that, that reality basically. So it seems to me that we can get clues what is happening on the outside and apply them in our own life. And for example, this as a core aspect of us walking out our own Great Awakening, our own reset, our own, clearing of debts and creating what we want in our life. And Michael, you talk about the power of like creator, like we are creators. We hear that concept all the time, but this is actually putting that in the real world into action and making it real. So
that's right.
The question I have, and then forgive me, you guys, we're going to get to your questions. Just give me 1 minute. And my question is this. We talked about if you have public debts, that this course discharges those debts. That's one of the main core aspects of benefit in this course, in addition to learning who you really are and accessing that power. What will equity do for me if I don't have any debt? What will the equity passage do for me if I don't have any particular public debts right now?
That's a great common question because some don't have debts. However, I mentioned at the discharge how it applies to contract offers. So anything that comes in your box from an official public entity or commercial entity is an offer in some respects. Now, sometimes they're just flyers, but if it has your name on it and they're trying to compel performance, which is get you to do something, or there's a sum mentioned on it, then that's a contract offer. That's a negotiable instrument. So if the law tells us that if I always use the analogy of the box of donuts, okay? If someone offers you a box of Krispy Kreme donuts, hey, I got these donuts, aren't they beautiful? You want one? And if you refuse and say, no, I don't want to look at them, that's rude. That's dishonorable. You haven't even honored their offer whatsoever. So, that if they hand them to you, if you take a donut, oh, they're so warm and, there's the glazed ones that are all gooey. I just want to take this donut. Then if you take one of their donuts, then guess what? You've taken their property, and now you're in a contract. Now, there's one way to do it, and that's to graciously take the offer, look at the offer, examine it, and hand it back to them. So you hand their donuts back to them. Thank you very much, but I'm okay here. That's how the honorable process of equity works. It's like a keto. We take the charge, and we redirect it back to them. Now, for instance, there's a lot of talk, for instance, about selective service flying around. That's a contract offer, a draft. They even call it a draft, okay? Now, that's a banking term. That's a negotiable instrument. So in this class, you'll learn what to do with that and stay in honor, and you don't have to do what it says on the draft. Because whenever they offer you something that says you got to do this, it's only because of that piece of paper that you have to do that. Now, when you honor and take care of it, just like the donuts, you're not bound to it. There's no consent, and you get to stay in honor the whole time without even arguing about anything.
And it also teaches you the art of inquiry. So one thing that Phil was just saying in short is that can help you remove yourself from a contract that you've maybe that there was a mistake. There's your cause. There was a mistake. So that you learn about contracts, you learn about how to powerfully navigate within contracts and without of contracts. Mm-hmm. And also you learn the power of inquiry. So Phil says often that you learn how to, as king, you're the one who's asking questions instead of the one that's being the subject to questions. And when you do that, it helps. So there's a power in this. It helps you drill into the truth of what is natural. So it's a little challenging to explain exactly how all that functions, but I don't know, maybe you want to take a moment to explain that aspect of the art of inquiry, just in brief.
Yeah, and essentially, just to answer the question short, and I'll talk a little more about that, is that the confidence that when you are presented with any type of communication or offer from the public, You have the confidence and the tools to reply to that without consenting, without refusing, without creating controversy, honor it, settle it, and be done with it. Have a nice day. That's the beauty of it. So it doesn't matter what it is. Now, the art of inquiry is very important because the law says that the one that makes the claim bears the burden of proof. So when someone makes a claim against us, they have to answer our inquiry because they bear the burden of proof. And if they can't answer the inquiry, then guess what? They have to let that claim go. And they can also fall into dishonor with that too. So what we do is it's empowering because there's a certain program that's run in the matrix here that get, like Michael was saying, to make us subject. Even in school, they'd take us to the principal's office and we'd feel like there's an authority figure above us that would bear down, and we would feel like we needed to comply, or that in those type of, or even at the airport, for instance, going through the security checkpoint, there's a feeling of like, I got to obey and I got to follow along with this. But however, most of the laws that are being enforced in the fictional world are not even positive law. They're negative law, or something called color of law. Color of law, it appears to be real, but it's not. It's not enforceable. And we show that in the course. We go through this. And again, we don't argue about the specific things, but what we do is we inquire into the true nature, the true lawful and equitable nature of the situation. And it's exposed through our questions that they really do not have any standing to even be bringing a claim against us. So that's the essence of it.
So you guys can already tell how much of a teacher Phil is. He is such a teacher. He embodies this, and he helps you see this. And this is all embodied in the course. I just wanted to put it out there because, yeah, at any rate, you can get the essence of where Phil comes from. I want to help dive into some of these questions so we can jam some of the stuff out, because some of these are just straightforward questions. We've already answered some of these already, but let's highlight them and answer them again. If one has not yet acquired their national status, shifting into the private, is equity still available as a path to remedy? So for starters, national status, passport, it's a political status change, by the way. So I don't want to go down that rabbit hole right now. But to answer your question very directly, you do not need any kind of particular status, no paperwork, no preemptive anything to express equity, because we are the divine. We are the true currency of the system. We are the ones that actually hold the power, the sovereigns. And when you're in that position, you don't need any status. You are the ultimate status. You want to say it in a different word, Phil?
Yes, the maxim that says equity acts on the person, or in personam. As long as you're living and breathing, you can apply equity. So that's who gets to apply equity, is the natural sentient being of men and women. So if you have a pulse and you have a breath, you can apply equity, and nothing else is required.
Yeah, so when I'm talking about national status and stuff in the Foundation for Self-Governance, those pathways are designed for a reason. They're buildups of your power and strength. We call them bridgeways out of Babylon. And each one of those pathways is designed to help you move yourself slowly or as fast as you want it in the public. And equity helps you clean your affairs up in the public while you're moving back into the private. I think I said public by accident, but while you're moving back into the private. And then you learn, once you really embody that, then you minimize your challenges in your life, and you can stand forth and you can navigate your affairs as a trustee in certain trusts. Now, there's a whole lot in that. I don't want to spend the time talk about that, but equity is what cleans your hands and all that and keeps you in that place of equilibrium. So, great question. Does the EIN replace SSN in equity? No. There's no need, there's no use of anything at all with the EIN or Social Security number in equity. You might be thinking of equity, exclusive equity. Now, that might be more of an exclusive equity question, but that's not what we're teaching here. This is post-1933. There is a distinct difference.
Yeah, and I want to say for a second, there's a lot of controversy about the name, the all caps name, the Social Security number, the business entity. That's just a business. So one of the things we focus on is how to administer your business, and you can settle the claims against that entity. You have the power to do that in equity. So it's not something to be afraid of. As Michael said at the beginning, we just got to know who we are and who we're showing up as, and that's what we stress.
Now, we teach you in the fellowship how to navigate through trusts and all that, and there's EINs and all kinds of things in there, but that's not directly what we're talking about here. And the same thing with land pats. I know some of you guys had questions about that. You can learn all about that stuff in the fellowship, but today we're specifically just talking about equity jurisprudence and the equity passage class itself. Go ahead, take this question, Phil. This is interesting.
Is there a word for unalienable that does not define? Let's see, wait. That does not define what it is by what it is not. Well, unalienable, it says in the word, it means it can't be liened, which means it's a natural right. It means that it's above any contractual fictional terms. We studied the natural versus the fiction in the presentation. So it's more of a concept and it's something to unpack. And I encourage you to even do a little bit more reading on it. By what is not, well, if you contract your rights away, see consent, every contract or every agreement has to be consented to, either by express consent, acquiescence, or even your conduct. So you can waive an unalienable, stance. Even in court, they might say you have the right to time, right? A speedy trial, that's part of due process. The judge can ask you, just to give yourself more time to provide yourself with a better defense, would you like to waive your right to time? Okay, they want to put you in a loop where they don't have a deadline to bring it to trial. So you can say yes, and if you do, then yeah, you just waived your right, your due process. So that's an example of how you can waive rights that are in front of you. However, the correct response should be, does the record reflect I reserve all of my rights with explicit reservation and without prejudice? That's the right answer. And the judge says, yes, it does, because they can't use threats, duress, coercion, force, or fear to get you to consent to something. However, if you consent under use of threats, duress, coercion, force, and fear, then the law says that when consent is attained, all defects are forgotten, essentially, or washed away. So that's what we're up against, and so let's leave it there. But we can waive rights if we want to, or we can reserve them.
Yeah, an unalienable right is just what is natural and what is protected by the Constitution and all the the constitutions that you have in your particular countries. It's a tricky one. It takes a minute to wrap the mind around those two words and to understand. I get your question as you're trying to get the definition through another way. It can be tricky. So here's another question. How or where can we find ways to achieve a Lloydell status for property and land? The best way to do it is to click the link that Josh had up there. If you haven't gotten the ebook, get the ebook. Go into the landing page. Now at this point, you're a member. You can enroll into the equity passage if you want. But you're a member, and you're gonna get a password to get into the fellowship. Go into the fellowship, and you can read about a Lloydell title, etc. It's all in there. It's all in there. Thank you for that question.
Yeah. Yes. Are there equivalents to Article 1, Section 10 on contracts in other countries as well? Yes. Yes. Everybody's operating on contracts. That's just the way the world works. As I said, it doesn't matter what nation you're in. There's a click box, or you got to sign your name all the time. There has to be an agreement for almost every step in commerce, and that's because this is the way that the world works. So definitely look up your Constitution. The gold and silver money will be in there. So we're the contract clause. They go hand in hand. And back before the money change, there needed to be lawful consideration, gold or silver, in the contract typically. And now, because that's not there anymore, I mean, now there's charges and things like that, but there's also compelled performance to, for instance, like, hey, if you don't pay this, you get to go to jail or something like that. They don't say it like that, but I'm just saying that's the way it works. So again, it's all in there, but that's the way the whole world works, and there wouldn't be any commerce or intercourse or trade if that wasn't the case.
Yeah.
So to be explicit, Canada, UK, and people from other countries, we're asking, like, this is available to do in other countries, right? Most other countries, would you say? Like, is it in China and North Korea and Russia and stuff?
That's I've never had a student from those countries or anything like that, and so again, natural law, maybe equity isn't in their law system, but that, for instance, China is an ancient civilization, and you can rest assured that their contracts are sacred to them. So is natural justice and all of that. It just goes to the fundamental level and goes back before. But as far as like North Korea and things like that, I can't answer that question. I don't know firsthand and haven't delved into that. But definitely any country that anyone's hear from in this meeting, it's like I said, over 100. I think there's about 200 and something nations in the world, and about 140, 150. I was conservative on the 140 number on civil, and that's over. We're talking about 2/3 or over the amount of countries are in those two systems that actually have equity spelled out. Mm-hmm. Now, natural justice has, and I said if they're intercoursing with the law of nations and trade, they have to be playing by the same rules, so they can have justice and they can have resolution and remedy in all of their contracts and trade.
Okay, so North America, all of North America, yes. All of Europe, yes. Middle East, check with us. Africa, check with you guys, and all of Commonwealth countries as well, right? So like Australia, New Zealand, Hong Kong.
And a good way to look at it is if they have a constitution as well, because as Michael said, that the constitutions protect unalienable rights.
Yeah.
And they don't grant them; they protect them.
Correct them. Yeah.
So
South Africa for sure.
Yeah.
They're.
I misspoke. I don't think Hong Kong is a Commonwealth country anymore, but not on point. Okay, so next question.
Oh, this is
on civil, and that's over. We're talking about 2/3 or over the amount of countries are in those two systems that actually have equity spelled out. Mm-hmm. Now, natural justice has, and I said if they're intercoursing with the law of nations and trade, they have to be playing by the same rules, so they can have justice and they can have resolution and remedy in all of their contracts and trade. Okay, so North America, all of North America, yes. All of Europe, yes. Middle East, check with us. Africa, check with you guys, and all of Commonwealth countries as well, right? So like Australia, New Zealand, Hong Kong. And a good way to look at it is if they have a constitution as well, because as Michael said, that the constitutions protect unalienable rights. Yeah. And they don't grant them; they protect them.
Correct them. Yeah.
So
South Africa for sure. They're.
I misspoke. I don't think Hong Kong is a Commonwealth country anymore, but not on point. Okay, so next question.
Oh, this is a great question.
Okay, so is it UCC 1 notice necessary if corporation state denied equity principles? Yeah, that is a possibility. That's one of the ways that could go, because the law of, I'll just say this, the law of offer, someone makes you an offer. If you accept the offer, and for instance, if I go to buy a car and I go, how much for the car? And they go $34,000, and I go, can you put that in writing and sign it? That's a firm offer. Now, if I accept that offer, they're bound to give me that car for $34,000. That's the law of the contract. So when someone offers you, let's say the IRS offers you $106,000 offer, okay? And I want you to look at your bills, okay? And they call them bills too, that's another rabbit hole. There's not a minus or any kind of parentheses around it, which is a debit in bookkeeping. It's a credit. They're sending a credit on a negotiable instrument. So we're just not taught what to do with that. They teach us to be the debtor. We're really the creditors, everybody. We're the energy, the substance in the system. We're taught, it's flipped around, and contractually, because of our lack of knowledge and our lack of education, they get us the volunteer to be the debtor in the situation. And that's just the way it goes.
I want to answer the question in a different way. So this is a deep question. This is somebody who obviously has a little bit of understanding about UCC 1. So this is a deeper question for people that are a little more knowledgeable. So this might be throwing some of you really off the cliff here. So to answer the question directly, is it necessary? Nope, it's not necessary. However, it can be used if necessary. If necessary, there's all kinds of different ways to hold them into account, but it can be used if necessary. That's as direct as I can answer the question.
Let's see. In equity law, can you serve notice of liability to some of our legislatures, county, deep state run supervisors and school board? That's a process as you were talking. that other process as far as notice of liability. That's not exactly what we're doing here. We don't make claims in equity since 1933 because of the way that things are billed and charges are levied essentially and leaned. Then it's more of a defensive tool. It's the best defense in town. And then, as that UCC question alluded to, can turn into offense and accountability later. However, this is a way to be left alone. The art of inquiry is the tool in equity that we go after these type of people with by building the record of what they're up to and building liability through the building the record of inquiry. Because again, whatever they're operating on is not lawful, and if they're creating injury to anyone, we saw the maxims of equity. An injury, it will not allow an injury or a wrong to occur. So that's how we build in this process, but we don't bill officials in this process. That's not something we do.
Yeah, and I love the NOL process, by the way. I totally support it. It's just different.
Yeah, and it's a good tool to have in your arsenal too, your toolbox as well. However, it will not provide the defense that we're talking about because that's more of an offensive tool.
Yeah, and I'll just say, like, I was honored to co-found the In Power movement with Cal Washington.
Yes.
inpowermovement.com/Josh to save $50 a month on membership there. I think the two are complementary, but what you guys are doing is different because it's about our own resetting, like our own great reset, mentally, spiritually, financially, right?
It's totally about self-governance, finding your way out of the system or intercoursing in with the system with complete power. That's the easiest way I could say it.
Yeah. And thank you for, it was slipping my mind. I know Cal Washington movement. Yeah, it was right on the tip of my tongue, but it's slipping. So thanks for mentioning that.
Deep love and appreciation.
Yeah, big time. Is it set up for the church trust included in the price of the educational fellowship? Well, I mean, those are private details in some respects, so go check it out on the site. However, Michael mentioned at the beginning the pathways of self-governance, the trifecta, which is about setting up your church and your trust and things like that. That's one of the pathways in the fellowship. It's not the equity pathway. So it's complementary, but it's not exactly what we're speaking of right here. And we do have it available. It's the best location for open foundation or charitable trust if you are located in Europe. Again, that's more of a question for that trifecta pathway. So definitely go to the fellowship and you can read all about these type of details as far as it goes with setting up entities.
Yeah, and again, once you get that ebook, you're automatically a member, and then you'll get a password and you can come in and you can look at some of those details. But by the way, just to quickly answer the question, there is no jurisdiction when it comes to setting up your church ministry. There isn't a location where you set it up. It's divine. That's something that you'll learn about. Yep.
So question, can you named the 3 strongest equity courts in the world in this moment? So equity is in common law, for instance, equity is one of the 3 jurisdictions. There's common law, there's equity, and there's admiralty maritime, which we covered in the presentation. So equity needs to be in every courthouse that's in the system because it's one of the jurisdictions. It wasn't ever taken away. Now, when they merged into this commercial admiralty maritime procedural law, they shrouded it and they act like it doesn't exist. But that's just because you need to be the one to bring it into the matter, and then you will be put before the chancery, it's called, the master in chancery. And I even had a student who was in a courthouse going into courthouse the other day, and in the elevator it said master in equity in the directory in the elevator. They're in the courthouse. There's someone in the courthouse that's a specialist that is authorized and to administer equity jurisdiction. It's a separate jurisdiction than the rest that's running in the courthouse.
Yeah, and there are actual chancery courts. They're not necessary. You can find your way to chancery courts, and there's a whole history in there to learn about that. And of course, you learn some of that with Cal Washington, but you learn that as well in the equity passage class. But you don't have to go to a chancery court to express equity. It's everywhere.
It's in the courthouse already, and there's something called at law and equity, where there's in law and equity, so it's the fictional version. And in some states here, like Tennessee, for instance, has the chancery court, but they're running fiction out of there. But there's still an equity person in that courthouse. So even if they call it chancery on the outward appearance, it doesn't mean that you're definitely in the equity jurisdiction by default. So again, we can't go in there and say, hey, bring me to equity. There's a maxim that says a good judge ought to always have equity before his eyes. So it doesn't say you shall. It's up to us to bring it. One another maxim is in order to receive equity, one must do equity. So if you don't go in there doing equity with clean hands, then don't expect to get in front of the judge, because they don't have to give it to you. There's another maxim that says the biggest injustice is to extend equity too far. Okay, so they can't just give it to you. You got to show them and prove that you're doing it. And that's where the energy field comes in, and that's where this teaching will teach you how to do it and how to get it.
And there's some differences there between like exclusive equity, where people are just wanting to, like, how do I get my card so I can buy everything I want? Like, that's really not what this is all about. Anyway, I don't want to get down that rabbit hole. So the difference between quitclaim deed and land patent, as quickly as I can say, a land patent is the highest law of the land. So if you look at the supremacy clause in the Constitution, it says that treaties are the highest law of the land because they're contracts. So all of these land patent superior titles are always superior to the inferior title or color of title of quitclaim deeds. So one is basically an inferior commercial instrument, and the other one is superior law based on treaties. So land patents are superior. That's the quickest, easiest way I can explain.
Do you guys work with Ron Gibson and his land patent process, or is that something sort of parallel to what you do?
It's parallel to what we did. I mean, Ron's a friend of mine. I've learned a lot about land patents from Ron, and we've taken it several layers deeper, and we've created a very concise, more autodidactic course where people can learn themselves, and we've added a whole bunch of layers onto it.
How many people would you say have done equity passage, and secondly, how many people have done the land patent process or are learning about that in your fellowship?
Well, there are two distinct different things.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the land patent, hundreds. Yeah.
Okay.
And we've actually kind of kept the land patent a little bit quiet. We're getting ready to like open that door and be a lot more boisterous. And we're calling it the Lloydale Land Pathway. It's phenomenal. It's extraordinary. I could tout about it all day long, but I should, because we've worked hard on putting it together. I don't know how many people have gone through equity. Honestly, I don't have any idea. A lot.
Hundreds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is, just to be clear, this is the next wave of where people can come in and join not only the recorded content, but the live streams and the weeklies and the Telegram group. That's right. That's starting. When is that starting? Like in 3, 4, 5 days?
Great question.
We did like the first kind of kickoff already, and the enrollment's ending on Wednesday, which is the day that we're doing the Q&A, live Q&A for Module 1. So it's still at the very beginning. It's still the time to jump in, but it's a guided process, and so there's a live Q&A after every module's released. You have time to review it, come up with your questions. Then we meet, and it's just all it is interaction. And then we have we don't use Telegram anymore. We have a private hosted chat. We've moved away from that platform, and we're moving away. And that's all it's private, so that's all I'm gonna say. But yeah, we are moving into the area where we can interact all the time, and it doesn't end with the course. I saw someone earlier say the course lasts for 7 months. Well, there's actually an alumni community too. So even after the course duration ends, the intention is to build a strong, resilient community and ensure that everyone can successfully apply this in their lives and matters. And there's more programs I can't discuss in the public, but there's also more support programs and things like that as well.
Yeah. I like this question. New freedom entrepreneur over here. Hello. Curious if this equity course will help navigate a sovereign relationship with the IRS, or if the citizenship pathway would be better. Well, I mean, that could be answered in so many different ways. I just want to say, from the lens of Foundation for Self-Governance, when you're finished setting yourself up, then you minimize all those challenges. So all these challenges with the IRS and everything that you're talking about, they just won't exist anymore. If they do exist, then you can always express equity to settle and close that matter. Okay, so that's why we were talking about earlier, equity helps you wash your hands of all the obligations you've got going on and while you're building your life in the private and learning about how to stay in that private ledger, right? So that's a question that you have to answer for yourself. Where are you in your process? If you're kind of fresh and have a bunch of obligations, equity is probably a great instrument for you to step into and learn how to settle and close your matters with the IRS while you're building yourself up in the private through private trusts in the divine jurisdiction and changing your status to where you can travel privately, right? It's just a simple way for you to function. It's practical and usable. That's why we have these particular pathways. So anyway, I hope that answers your question.
Just to be clear, students in Equity Passage routinely, can remove the IRS from their lives, right? And can discharge those amounts, correct? Like that directly applies
Absolutely.
to tax and IRS matters, yes?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I mean it's amazing what can happen. They know this very well. They've received thousands and thousands of these, what we do and
discharges.
And if you go become a private member, and when you watch the video, there's one specific testimonial shared there about this, and I won't say any more about that here. But it's amazing, and it works. It definitely works very, very, very well in that situation.
Yeah, I want to say one other thing to fulfill the last part of a question earlier when somebody was asking in regards to how equity works in this UCC 1. There are discharge practices out there, and I'm understanding that a lot of discharge practices that other people are using through exclusive equity and secured party creditor, I'm not certain. They're having struggles getting it completed, and they have to go to litigation. We don't litigate. We have different ways of navigating things where litigation is not a necessity. So you don't actually even have to learn law to apply this. To be a litigator, you got to learn law. So I just wanted to bring that forward now because you might hear about it as you're going through this learning process. There is no litigation. There's no need. Never was. Never will be. Do you teach about 508c1s? Yes, absolutely. So I want to say this very clearly so you can get the lens to where we're coming from. The 508c1a it's a public code. It's essentially part of the 501c3. So if you're asking for permission to exist, then you've already defeated yourself. If you're asking to be a 508 or you want 508 status, well, then you're asking for a benefit. And if you want to learn more about what I'm talking about, you can go into the fellowship through the lens we were just sharing. Get the ebook, go in, become a fellowship member, and look at the trifecta. And you're going to learn at the distinction between something that's free and something that is a 508c1a. There's a distinction there. Great question. Go ahead, Phil.
Okay. So do the teachers have records of the theories they are teaching, holding up in lawsuits? How many? Where can we read about them? Yeah, as we talked about, this is a private remedy, and discharge by definition is generic, which means it's not talked about or spoken about. I gave you one example that's high profile already of someone who's sitting in the White House right now, and there's other examples like that. And I showed, and if you watch the video, you'll see some other real life examples. However, most of the time, we don't even receive a letter saying that it is discharged. It just, the claim, when someone doesn't have a claim, they stop presenting you with offers. So, and I want to also say that the word theory is used here. See, when you get the proper education and I walk you step by step on where it's written in the law and where everything is, this is not a theory. This is law. It's written in the law, and we can read it with our own two eyes. Now, there's a lot of theories out there. I agree with that because I talk to people every day. I do this full time every day, day in, day out. I talk to people all the time that have theories about things, and I'm saying, "No, can you please provide me where you're reading that in the law?" And if they cannot, then I qualify that as a theory. We're talking about equity here. We're talking about a system of jurisprudence that is actually written into the law, and that's where our remedy exists. So I want to bring that forth. However, this is not public, and this is not in precedents, which is more common law, and Admiralty Maritime operate in precedents and case law, and this is not that. I can show you a lot of, when we start applying equity, a lot of interesting things start coming on the record, and a lot of interesting events start happening. And that's because we're seeing the public compensate for the private being applied. And so you can definitely, when you have educated equity eyes, you can see through it and see everything that's going on. Then you have judges telling you from the bench that things that are in Law 101 don't exist, and that's very interesting as well. And so there's just a lot of interesting things that happen when you apply it. But I encourage you, if you're asking this question, to get the ebook, watch the video. You get to see some real life evidence and some things going on in there. But that's private as well, and that's something I could share much more about in the private. But this isn't the forum for that.
Just want to say there's about 5 to 8 questions left. Now is the time. You guys put your question in the chat. We promise we'll be efficient as we wrap this up, approaching the 2-hour mark, but this has been tremendous. Next question.
Once the course begins, how long until one can take action towards remedying versus various public issues? Phil, you're by far best to answer that.
Yeah. It's about 20 weeks, the course. So by the end of that time, you will have the tools to be applying this in your matters, and probably you'll be able to start working on things towards the end of that time period, and then you'll be definitely ready to start applying your matters after the 20-week period is up. You'll have all the tools in place.
Yeah. Lifetime exit. So as you know, the course is 7 months. If you want to stay in, you can join as an active member, and you can stay in as long as you want. You're forever in the alumni group. There's ongoing live chats and communications that we offer as well. So it's ongoing. It's as long and deep as you want to stay in.
Is the alumni group included in the cost of the course? Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Lifetime access.
Yeah. It's lifetime access. However, we do, after 7 months, the course duration, there's active membership in the fellowship, which is you get lots of other wonderful things with that. However, that's just an ongoing thing and that's where the lifetime access comes in. So 7 months, and then active membership allows you to continue having the lifetime access. So I want to put that caveat out there.
Yeah.
This is so about a payment plan. I'm going to say yes. I can't share details about that. Go to the link that Josh is sharing with you, and you'll be able to see the option for that. And I also want to bring up, because of the intention here is to make this accessible to our members, and so we've done whatever we can to offer it at a very great value, considering compared to a lot of historical offerings. So it's definitely, that's all. We can't share details about, we can't solicit to the public. So please come into the private, and we'll share all those details with you.
Yeah, all that information is in there. Again, if you just want to get the ebook and go in there and see the pop-up page, all that stuff's going to be explained. Every one of those details. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Liberty's Horizon was a seminal event. Yeah, thank you. Great question. Corporations are allegedly in the private, according to some folks. So why do we want to join them in the private? Oh, well, I think that might be, so there's a video that I've had out for a while, a couple of years, called Breaking the Spell. And that's one of the first things we talk about is, the public and the private. We've heard all our life, if you want to be in the private, then you want to get an LLC or an S corporation or something. Well, that's not in the private at all. That's completely in the public. And if you're in some kind of a corporate entity, then you are in the public. You're a creature of the public, period, point blank. So it's just a deception. The system uses words of deception to confuse us. And I'm assuming this is what you're referencing, but this is my understanding of what you're asking. You're not. Yeah. If you're joining an LLC or a corporation, you're not in the private. You're in the public.
It comes down to contracts again. And there are private companies or private sector, and those are the contracts that they hold. And they don't, for instance, they don't have to share their books. But when you become public, you have to be an open book, essentially, and that tells you a lot right there.
It's the same thing with the corporate soul. Some of you might have heard the corporate soul thing being thrown around, and it exists, and there's utilization for it. It's still a public entity. It's part of the attachment to the Social Security number and the public person and all that.
Ordinances are unlawful, correct, and used by legislatures, including to increase unlawful property taxes, which are the case in the county of Santa Fe, New Mexico. I showed you in the presentation fiction. Ordinances was one of the enactments, ordinances, statutes, all that stuff is of the fictional corporate United States, which is public. And so property taxes, for instance, that goes back to Senate Document 43. Look that up in 1933. All properties vested in the state, and that's because that's part of the confiscation of the substance in the nation. And that's just so we talk a lot about that. There's a lot of ways to angle that, but that's the way it is everywhere. They're fictional, they're contractual, and so yes, they're legal, essentially. And so yes,
Right. And I just want to say something about land and property. Property is the title. Property is the piece of paper. That's the instrument. That's different than your land. So there's a lot of confusion in terminology. So in 1933, just in the United States, and again, this has happened all over the world. But in 1933, when they're so-called bankrupt the corporate United States, when the globalist bankers gave money to the corporation, then they wanted to lean against that asset. They wanted to lean against that money. So they leaned against their public and private property and our future labor through taxation. So that's why they had to make everything a corporation, right? So that lien, that money, that taxation that you're paying is not on your actual land. It's on the property, which is a piece of paper. And you learn that distinction in the fellowship as well. A lot to learn there.
Yeah. Does this offer include everything you offer in the fellowship, or are there additional courses or charges to set things up if when you get to a certain place you want to go into additional power? The pathways at this are the 4 pathways to foundations for self-governance. So we're here to talk about equity today. However, the fellowship has 3 other pathways that empower self-determination and self-governance. So we're specifically speaking on equity. However, Michael has touched on the other pathways. And so again, the first step is to join us in the private, and then you can see more about what we have going on in the fellowship and get more of these specific details.
Yep.
Yeah.
I've studied both a alloidal title and land patent. Isn't alloidal more supreme? Government can't touch you. Both alloidal and land patent. Government can't property. Okay, so alloidal title it's an essence. So alloidal title is when you've gone through processes to unencumber your land, you are now holding alloidal title, alloidal land. There isn't some actual piece of paper that you get that says, you got alloidal title. No, it is a process. It's an essence. Just like there's an essence of equity, but the process is how you use equity. Alloidal title is the essence. The land patent is a process or an existence of a document through treaty that you can learn how to pull forward. You're not creating a new patent. They already exist. You're drawing it forward into the present that's lying dormant currently. So there's a distinction in there.
So Steve Smith says, thanks for getting a much greater detail of all in equity. Ashley says, thank you for all helpful. And then next question.
Oh, this is so good. Could equity dissolve the Sesquiview?
Yep, absolutely. If you want to go that far, equity is the way to exit the system and be redeemed and leave and go to peace and leave. However, there's a lot that comes with that, and that's a very big decision to make, because you cannot intercourse in commerce anymore without having another plan in place. So, but what created the law tells us the way a thing is made, it can also be unmade. So we can absolutely dissolve that, but that would also mean having no birth certificate. So that's just the way that goes. So it is possible.
Yeah, and I come from the place of I don't know why you would want to.
Yeah.
But that's a deep topic. So great question.
Whole nother conversation.
Yeah. First time to ever hear about what you are teaching. How does filing or not filing with the CTA or BOI beneficial ownership registration for LLC of 20 employees or less fall within this?
Well, the LLC is a contract with the state, so you have to. Yeah, the corporation. So you need to carry out or perform to your obligations of that contract. And if you're going to be in the system, you're going to be a duck. You have to quack like a duck, swim like a duck, and fly like a duck. So you're going to have to perform as you would with that contract in place. Now, there's other ways to navigate these type of situations without contracting with the state, and that's what we're really about. It's not about entering the state, and we don't teach how to go into the state and conduct business in their world. And as Michael said, that's their house. We don't go in there and tell them how to run their house, and we take our shoes off at the door if they ask us to. However, we don't have to go into their house, and we don't have to be a part of it. And that's the point of all of this self-governance, is if we enter the house, then we're governed by them, and we submit when we enter the door. However, we can stay in our own autonomy and not enter into their threshold.
Yeah, I want to throw my 2 cents in really quick. There's a lot in this. There's a lot of different things you can do. Just for starters, you can hold a trust. You can navigate through a trust, and there's no law anywhere that says that a trust has to have a permit or a license to exist. So you can function in the essence of business through a trust without needing to do this crazy dance. However, you can also have an LLC if there's some requirement that's really necessary in the public, like you need something to acquire some patented this, that, or the other to benefit your members. Fine. Open up the LLC. The trust itself could be the sole member of that, and then it moves into the private. So there's things to learn. I'm hoping this helps answer your question. But if you're in the public and you've got an LLC, then you have to follow through with that obligation, which is some element of filing. Just a pass through, an LLC can't be taxed. It has to move everything to the K1. It's got to move everything to the members. So, just know what you're in. Know what you're dancing in. Well, yes and no. A fellowship is an organization. It's a group of people, an association of people that have come together to educate, and it's in the heart of love. That's it. That's our definition. But other than that, no. Regarding property versus land, my understanding is that property would include building structures, objects such as vehicles, etc. Is that correct? Thank you. Well, if it's private land, yes, you can hold it as private property, sure. It gets a little bit trickier when you're talking about we try to create the clearest distinctions possible. And when you say property, then the corporate system is going to look at that as that paper, that deed, that commercial instrument. So it's a little tricky. And now when you're getting into alloidal land and you get into land patents, when you have a lien against it, like from the bank, okay, the bank will actually look at the structure as the thing that they might be leaning against, not the actual land itself. Okay, so there are distinctions, and I know for a fact this has been proven over and over and over. You can pull forth your land patent and you can hold the title on that land. You can send a letter to the mortgage company and say, hey, listen, I'm the holder of the alloidal title. I'm the patent holder of this land. Do not step on the soil. I will hold you in trespass. And then suddenly they're willing to negotiate the value on that loan. Kind of weird, because they can't walk across that land to get to the structure. Property or real estate. Yeah, well, property and real estate are the same thing. Through my lens, they're the same thing. They're commercial instruments. Could we use our home as a church location? Absolutely. Isn't it already? According to biblical references, and I probably have over 150 different references through all kinds of ancient texts and philosophical texts, that the man's body is his church temple. And every word that comes out of your mouth is the word of God or the word of creation, or you're in your ministry. It's happening right now. We are in church and we are in an aspect of ministry. So yeah, of course. Trust to protect our children to have access to our assets if someone happens to the parents. If we remove trust, how does it keep the government from taking our assets? So there's a lot to learn about trust. That's a big reason why people use trusts, because when you remove the liability away from you and you're putting it into another entity that the system sees as sui juris, means of its own power, nobody can go in and take that out, even if you pass on. But remember, because you learn that you're the trustee, you're not the trust, and the trust is not you. So if you remove, pass on, resign, leave, it doesn't change the assets that are in that legacy. Doesn't change the corpus. All you do is pass it on to the beneficiaries, or the beneficiaries become the trustees. There's a lot to learn in the power of administering trusts. Property is anything, items or attribute, tangible, intangible, that can be owned by a person or entity. Property is the most complete right to something the owner can possess, use, or transfer.
I want to add a distinction to this. You need to put private or public in front of property. There's something called private property, which doesn't involve the state in a contract, and then there's public property. Now, if you register your car with the state, then that's actually public property. So it's not private anymore. So if you have a contract that includes a third-party intervener, someone's permission, a registration, okay. If you do any of that kind of stuff, then by default, it's going to be public property, honestly, in this system, unless you declare it private property and have a contract set up to back that up, then that's something to look at, okay? Who holds the legal title? If there is a legal title, then that shows you that it's public. That just the name legal title is not a good thing. So when we talk about equitable title and we talk about private ownership, then those are distinctions to look at.
I just want to jump in here. Okay, so I have 5 questions that I need to ask, and I'm going to challenge you guys in full understanding that we'll have time to get into these, in the fellowship, right? Whether you're a free member or whether you come into the course, but see how quickly, how efficiently we can do these. Okay, let's go. So how will my credit score be affected by the equity discharge process?
So that's a public score. So in the short term, it's going to take a hit while you're discharging because they're not going to acknowledge a private remedy. That's just the way it works, which actually benefits you later on in the process. So in the short term, while discharge is occurring, your credit's going to take a hit. There's many dynamics to that. We talk about that a lot in the course as far as like preparing you for how that's going to operate. However, when discharge is complete and there's no longer a claim, then because it's a private remedy, it needs to be removed from your credit report because they can't show on your credit report that it was privately discharged with equity. So that goes poof off of your record. Sometimes they naturally do it by themselves. Sometimes we compel them through the art of inquiry to remove that from your report. And then oftentimes the credit score will go up as a result because of that claim just disappearing off of there. So that's just something to take into consideration.
Does applying equity discharge usually end up in court?
No, most of the time not. If we have to go to court, it's actually the court needs to uphold equity, as we've talked about when we apply and we bring it. So most of the time, no, it does not need to go to court, but we're very confident in that realm as well. But most of the time, it just discharges through the mail.
3 last questions here, and then there's some specific questions from people that about getting started, questions that they have, concerns that they have, and so forth. So, how is it honorable to discharge debt when I borrowed the money?
Great question.
Love it.
Yeah. Well, we talked about the gold and silver being removed and the public credit being the substance. We're the substance in the system. So our credit authorization is what creates the digits in the first place. So when you sign a loan application, the signature creates the digits, which funds the account, which is then loaned to you, and there's a promissory note or a contract that is making you the debtor that you agree to for those funds to be distributed. And so essentially, they didn't loan you anything. Your commercial energy created the funds. Now they've loaned them. They're loan servicers, they call them. Okay, they're servicing that credit. And so essentially, when you sign up as a debtor on those contracts, that you have to pay that back with your sweat equity plus interest, and they've already gotten the digits. So it's a double dip plus interest. So the law tells us the way a thing is made, it's also unmade. So our signature created the digits, our signature can also discharge the digits. I want you to think about the analogy of the Aikido. The charge comes at you, we redirect it back for discharge. It's a natural process. And so, yes, I think that might be one of the next questions, but there are ethics to this. So this is just not a free-for-all, and there's reasons for that in the principles of equity. However, can I keep borrowing money with the intention to discharge? Intention is the key word. Intent is the most powerful force in law, and our intent is everything. So if you intentionally are entering contracts with the intention of not honoring that contract obligation, that can be considered fraud. Okay, because there's the intent is there. That intent is the difference between first-degree murder and manslaughter. So if intent can be proven, then that might get in the way of the principles of equity applying. However, if you made a mistake and it wasn't an intentional thing, then you can disencumber and exit. So there are this is a whole rabbit hole. I go into like mini sessions talking about this kind of stuff in the passage, so you get a clear distinction on it. But this is not a way to use their corporate system for your benefit. It's a way to settle your claims and be left alone. And I think Michael has something to say about that too, real quick.
No, that was great. That was great.
Okay.
How difficult is it to learn equity? I know we talked about it's a 7-month course, right? And then people are automatically included in the alumni group, and they can choose to do the other pathways or not.
Yeah.
How difficult and how much time and energy does it realistically require?
It's great. You don't need to go to law school. You don't need to learn all the written law. We talked about that. This is the unwritten law. It's based on principle. So it's very intuitive once you get comfortable with the principles, and that's what I delve into deeply in the course. You start to think in those terms, and so it's intended for anyone to be able to learn this. People of all different backgrounds. I mean, I've had past attorneys in the course. I've had people that have no experience with law whatsoever. And once you embody the principles, you don't need to know volumes of law books. And we're not going in to litigate and argue these laws and make claims and say, this code and this case law and stuff. It's about principle, and it's about universally applicable principles and processes. So it's kind of a one size fits all in some respects, which is very nice. And it goes across jurisdictions too, because that's like common law. If anyone has experience in that, you may have success in one place, but not in another, because it depends on the customs, because there's a maxim that says custom supersedes common law. So common law can be defeated by custom of the place, but equity, as we saw earlier, the law is nothing without equity, but equity is everything even without the law. It doesn't matter about custom with equity. We can bring that and get our results universally.
Here's my answer. You already know equity. We just help you remember it.
Hey, that's even better.
Okay, just wrapping up here. I'm going to share a couple of number of comments here from people wondering, okay, can I do this? Can I afford this? What is the pathway? When is it offered next, kind of thing. So I'm just going to throw some of these comments on the screen here as you, perhaps Michael, you can address, okay, what is the cost, right? And how can people can get started? So Freedom Forager says, I see the extraordinary value you're giving through this material education, and I wish I had access to the credit to participate, but that is a barrier to entry, unfortunately. Thoughts on the cost?
Okay. Well, I'm just going to say very quickly, if you want to learn more about, the exchange and those elements of things, you're going to have to become a member and go in and just look at the different ways that you can exchange. We've tried to lay it out in a way where it gives you some flexibilities in that. We understand everyone's in different places, but you can also be very creative when you start learning about credit. And I mean, it's so powerful to learn this. So remember, the only limitations you have are the ones that you put around yourself.
And our intent is to make this available and accessible to our members. And so we do what we can on our end to make that possible.
When I attempt to apply for credit, I am denied of the credit I would use to participate in this program. Any suggestions?
Yeah. Again, that's kind of a situation where it's kind of the cart which came first, the chicken or the egg, because if there's no ability to get credit, then there's probably impetus for discharge. However, we don't work in that system, and as far as that goes, there's a ways to be creative, and when as far as like making things happen, and again, I can't share what we've come up with here in the public, but when you come into the private, you can learn more about that.
Yeah. We just say, where there's a will, there's a way. If this is something that you feel deep in your heart you want to learn, you'll find a way to get into the course. And I just know this from experience. You can do this. You can open up that pathway for you to find your way into the course. And just know that the impetus shouldn't be on us to make sure that you have that you come up with a way to find the exchange. It's your responsibility to do that, and you can. And let me tell you, we've had a lot of people come in and say, I don't have the money to do this. And we say, well, find it, and then you can work your way into the course. And guess what? They do. It's miraculous.
And then it's a way to become have different tools to navigate that system going forward and settle the claims.
Yes.
And not feel under it or feel piled up on, which is a lot of people do when they come in, because we have not been taught to navigate like we teach you how to navigate.
Anything to add on discharging debt? I think Ashley is wondering, like, what about potential penalties, or the other question there?
As far as penalties go, we're working in a public credit system, and the public cannot keep track of private remedies. However, everyone has the ability to keep private records if they want to. It's not very common, but as far as like having a penalty for it, when we're actually doing something that's lawful and written into the public policy, and somebody tries to injure you for that, then that's also, we read the maxim earlier about injuries, and that's something that can be inquired into as well. But no, typically they want issuance of credit in the system. That's how it's like a casino. They need that energy to keep on churning the wheels. And so if they denied everybody credit because they were lawfully discharging, then that would shut down their system, and that'd be counterproductive to how it's designed.
All right, just a couple more questions. I actually have another event I have to get to.
Me too.
I think I know the answer to this one, right? Like, you can ask it in the private once you're a private member.
Yep, 100%. And we do events for quick Q&As with our members and things like that as well. Yep.
I just want to say, I just got a message from our friend Jim Gale. Michael, you know Jim Gale? He has in Florida. He's doing
yes,
food
of course.
forest abundance. Yeah.
So, we're getting ready to start communications and working together. Yeah,
and he just messaged. I was able to listen to several segments. There are types of products and services we want to highlight on the platform that we are launching. And so
nice.
I just want to recognize, like, this is so on the leading edge, right? This is like probably years ahead of the time in which it flourishes. I'm used to this kind of thing. I'm like 6 years ahead of my time, and it's frustrating as hell, right? But this is just such an exciting wealth of value and encouragement in a world in which we're inundated with the external narrative. We're up one day, we're down the next day. We believe in Trump. We see through the lies. It's like we're being on this roller coaster of external stimulus that's designed to be bread and circuses, I think, right? And probably most of the people on this call can relate.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts, either on that or on, welcoming those who feel resonant with this to get started?
Yeah.
Phil, your thoughts?
Yeah, I do see one question. I just want to, it talks about, are the credit companies and the people that loan the money, which they didn't loan anything, are they ripped off by not getting paid? No, equity won't allow that to happen. All parties are made whole, and that's why this works. That's why a lot of other remedies of arguing don't work, because there's a commercial element and there's an account that's underlying. Equity settles the account in full. Everybody's made whole. Everybody, and it won't work unless that's the case. So everybody's made whole in the situation, and that's what we teach in the course. And so nobody loses. Equity wouldn't allow that to happen. It wouldn't be a thing. So now it's complicated, the whole thing of how that actually works, and it takes several sessions in the course to explain all of this and lay it out and show evidence. So that's as much as I can share right now. But I also, I look forward, you guys are so engaging and you have so many questions, and I could tell that we're in a group that really has critical thought and really looks deeper into things. And so I'm really excited for, all of you who have all these questions and you want to know more, that come into the fellowship. We talk about this all the time. That's what we're in fellowship for, is to strengthen each other, bring in our different perspectives, and grow stronger because of it. So again, this is a heartfelt invitation. Come on in, and we can talk a lot more about this, because you got a taste of what we're about here. But we can also open up a lot more and share without giving you these answers that, we'll come on in and we'll share more. We get to share with you when you come in. So take advantage of it. We look forward, and I look forward to seeing you in there, and I look forward to answering more of your questions.
The biggest part of what we share in the fellowship, heart-centered space, is support. It's really about support. Honestly, it's less about the education than it is about the support. It just happens to be the education's a vehicle where we get to find each other in community, where we can be supportive and loving to each other. And it's not just us, the teachers. It's not just us, the directors and the founders. It's all the people in the community. So Josh was saying earlier, he's been in other groups, and he goes, for whatever reason, the Cal Washington and then our groups have this peaceful, cohesive, loving, supportive energy that other groups don't have. And it's because we hold that container. And it's fortified by the beautiful, brilliant people that come in. So it's an open invitation. And Josh, obviously, you and I have really been developing a beautiful friendship over the years, and you also hold that same container. And we really want to work with people of this particular resonance and field. I think this is what creates the most rapid change. Oh, you're muted, or I can't hear you. I'll say that much.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, okay. Just to confirm, this is the correct email for support, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it is. Thank you. Yeah. And also, when you're a member, then you'll find the information for support at Sacred Honor, et cetera, et cetera. But if you just have some basic questions and you want to dive in, absolutely. Thank you.
Support at Sacred Honor EF for educationalfellowship.com. Mm-hmm. So, all right, let's wrap this up.
Beautiful.
I think you guys have both given your final comments, correct? Or is there anything else you want to say?
No, I feel complete. Thank you.
All right.
You?
Me, I'll just say this. Thank you so much for spending this. We thought it was going to be maybe an hour 20, 2 hours and 28 minutes. So you guys rock. This replay is going to reach many more. In full disclosure, I do receive a smaller portion of somebody who does sign up to this course based upon this link. Just out of curiosity, Michael, that savings code, JDS 500W3, will that still work after March 5th, at a lesser amount? Or when is the next? I think we had a question can't make this launch, somebody said, but when is the next one? When is the next window opening? How will it work going forward?
Great. The actual class enrollment period ends on the 5th. So the code doesn't work beyond it, and we don't have another offering for that. The class is closed. We're holding that container. We're moving people through the course.
Okay.
We actually don't have another course scheduled. We're going to change the way that we're bringing this forward after this class. And just being honest, we don't have a date for the next one. It could be 3, 4, 5 months down the road. We honestly don't know. So I'm only saying this because if you're anywhere in the realm of saying yes, then lean in and just do it, because it may be a while before we open it up again.
And once you said once you're a member, you got the ebook, then you can dialogue in the private about potential payment options and so forth. So so if you feel the resonance, their link is on the screen. It's in the description. You can proceed on that. And thank you again for everybody for being here today. Thank you, Michael and Phil. I just genuinely appreciate what you both are doing on the planet.
Thank you.
I know how hard it is to introduce new paradigms. From my personal experience, it can weigh heavy on one. And we absolutely need to have an interconnection and a community connection with others to be sustained in this process.
Yeah.
Especially for those who are at the leading edge. And I'm feeling just emotion on this, but I'm staying with this. Especially for those who are at the leading edge of introducing the pathways, and also just for everyone in these first waves, these initial waves of something which we can actually help participate in, not only for ourselves, but expanding it out. We can make the wave bigger, and we can make it go faster for everyone on the planet. So honoring the work that you're doing, and all the inner work that you guys have both done to get here, and your commitment just to be with us in this process. So
thanks, bro.
Thank you guys. Thank you for watching. God bless you guys, and we'll look forward to chat with you soon. Have a wonderful day.
Blessings.
Yeah, blessings. Thank you, Josh. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.